Welcome to the Social Media Church Podcast. I'm Neil Smith, and today we're talking about politics. So, DK, who you voting for? Who you voting for? Don't tell us. Don't tell us. To be clear, I'm out of prep this.
I would never tell y'all who I am voting for, but I am open in this space to discuss social media and politics and its impact. Whenever you're ready. Yes, sir.
Well, and DK, I'm gonna take you back to my early days as a social media pastor, probably 14, 15 years ago. And I was in charge of our church's social media. And our pastor decided that he was going to start posting on Facebook during the debate because he had some strong opinions. And you better believe 8 a.m. we were the biggest church in town. 8 a.m. the next day, the news trucks are out in front of our church wanting to talk to our pastor about his political opinions that he posted on Facebook. And I want to be very clear. I love this pastor and his intentions were good and he knew better. And then he went on to not just do that. He went on to actually even say something during his sermon that got us in even more trouble. And he felt this burden based on his opinions and, of what was going on politically and what was, going on in the presidential election.
Yeah.
And he couldn't not say something in his mind, but man, did it create drama within the local media. It created drama in our local congregation that had a diversity of people in the congregation that didn't see things the same way that he did. And it was a mess. And so I have scars from that. And so this is a tension, DK. We're in social media is being dominated and will continue to be dominated for the next 6 months or how much longer we have in this presidential election. And a lot of pastors feel like, hey, I have, the Bible says this and like this, I don't even want to talk about politics, but it's like they want to talk about it and they're not sure how to talk about it. And I don't know that we have the right answer, but we want to talk about our experiences, our thoughts, our concerns, and, all of that when it comes to how do we effectively navigate this politically charged climate thoughtfully as a church and with our church social media accounts and within the comments and all of that. So DK, what are your experiences and thoughts when it comes to politics in general and churches with social media, and how do we approach this?
This is going to be a very candid and open podcast. Y'all lean into this. For me, I'm going to talk about it from a pastor standpoint. From a pastor standpoint, you have a responsibility first to God, then to the local fellowship in which you're called to do what I would like to call, and I've heard it from Dr. Freddie Haynes and or Simon Sinek, and that is speaking truth to power.
Yep.
And what that means is standing up for what's right and telling people in charge what is what. And so some people will take that literally and speak through their political lens versus speaking through one that is rooted in biblical truths. And so for me, I want to stand up for the widows, orphans, and children that are the lost, least, and left out, as the book of Amos speaks about. But when it comes to our politics, some people can't seem to separate their personhood, their occupation, from the actual politics themselves. They see this as this all-inclusive thing versus us being diverse. And so I can tell you straight up and down that pastor was hell-bent on proving a point, and I am not knocking the pastor because I don't know him. Niels didn't say his name, so pastor, please don't call Niels or email. Call me. I'm here for it. But, he did that to prove a point that this is what God is saying. And it probably isn't what God is saying. It is more of, this is what you want to say.
Yep.
And so as the spokesman of that church,
yes,
you now are now in charge of saying everybody in here believes, thinks, feels, and says the same thing, when that's absolutely not the truth, man.
Yes.
Or woman of God, whichever one you want to be.
Yes.
You need to make sure that when you get up there and speak truth to power, that it's actually rooted in the Bible, it's actually truth, and it brings forth change in the power dynamics that be. You need to do that. So when it comes now I've set the stage. So when it comes to that, I've seen pastors walk in and say on certain days of the year, like 4th of July, we want to see a post go up that is flagged and red and white and blue. But when Martin Luther King birthday come around, oh, we don't really want to talk about that. That caused so much divisiveness in the church. And I'm saying to myself, you just made, in your pastoral position, you made a political stance about what we gonna post.
Yeah.
Pastors, get the hell out of those rooms that's making them decisions. You stick to the preaching. Just dribble your basketball when it comes to preaching. Since y'all want us to dribble our basketball, y'all dribble y'all basketball when it comes to preaching, and let the professionals handle what is necessary. Because it's going to be one of those days that you look past that's actually something that meant something to somebody, and they're going to be right on your top. So I'm not surprised if he said something, I wouldn't say reckless, but if he said something that was unfounded and the media showed up. I wouldn't be surprised if he or she, says something that is clickbaity, and now they have all this attention, because a lot of pastors, and I'm done with my soliloquy, they're not focused on preaching the word of God. They are focusing on how can I drive the YouTube numbers up, because to me, that results to more eyeballs on what I'm actually saying. And man or woman of God, that's probably not of God. That's more of you. And God knows how to take his hand off of people that's taking advantage of his people.
Yeah. And I want to talk about too, because we've got 3 platforms that I think are worth talking about here.
Sure.
And one is the church's accounts.
Absolutely.
One is the lead pastor's account, which is probably the biggest representation of the church. And then the rest is the other staff and volunteered leaders.
That's good.
And I think that we have a responsibility to all 3 of those in different ways of how we manage those, how we, guide those, even encourage those. And it gets really complicated. I think even more complicated in our staff and volunteers, because these are their personal platforms to share their thoughts and opinions, and they're people, in society that, and that's what social media in many ways is for, this kind of public dialogue around topics and issues. And so it is complicated, but I recently, I want to share this. One of my ministry heroes, a guy named A.R. Bernard, pastor here in New York City, such a legend.
Yes.
And he was challenged in a pastor's gathering I was at with him recently by somebody saying, how could you let this politician on your platform on a Sunday morning? And his response was one of those, I was just like, this is classic. One of the many reasons I love you. But he said, look, I believe that our people should be able to hear from these leaders directly. And I believe that if they can't hear from them direct, because all they hear is the sound bites through, mass media generally. And so I want to ask these leaders certain questions that I believe are important for our congregation to know and understand from them. And he's like, it's not me supporting them. It's not me saying to my congregation, you should vote for them. It's me saying, we as a church have enough influence that this leader wants to come and speak to you directly. So I'm going to take advantage of that. And I believe that I, as the pastor of this church, have taught my congregation well to run it through a biblical filter of what's right and wrong and make the decisions for themselves based on that. And so he's definitely not skirted politics within his church, and he's also not sided anywhere. So he has said, like, all of these politicians I agree and disagree with in different ways that I have on the platform, but there's none of them that I'm ever going to 100% agree with, and there's also none of them that I'm probably going to say you can't even come here, because if they're nuts and way off, I want my congregation to hear that and know that. And so I want to be able to clarify that for them, but I'm also not giving any kind of, reference to them, man. Or, just because they come to our church doesn't mean that we are, telling our congregation to vote for them. And he's like, we have Republicans and Democrats that come and have been on our platform to have conversations. And so I just love the way he has approached it.
Sure.
From his seat of influence in our city. And so DK, first, let's talk about the church social media accounts. And so the corporate accounts, and you have things like you mentioned, we're going to make posts like Happy 4th of July. I saw a lot of churches posting that, or you have things like posting about MLK Day.
Sure.
Or you have things, that are just going on in society. And there's always this tension of like, Christian nationalism.
Yes.
And how much do we end up overdoing that, underdoing that? And then what often happens I haven't monitored it, but we post Happy 4th of July, you're going to have people potentially commenting their political opinions in the comments. How do you manage that? And so what's your thoughts on the corporate accounts for the church, and as political dialogue begins to happen within those corporate accounts?
Yeah, man. I feel like corporate accounts are just that. They are to represent the body as a whole. If there is a certain lens in which that pastor or that staff member would like to go in, then we can openly discuss that. But I would also point them and say, hey, this is a slippery slope. If you start, if you comment on one one holiday, we don't say politics, one holiday, you are now responsible to comment on every holiday that is out there. Do you want to get into that? Or are there particular holidays that, hey, we don't care what nobody says, these are the ones that we're going to highlight? Also, I think what also matters is context, right? So in Texas, people feel a little bit differently about 4th of July and Juneteenth in Texas. Okay, that's a big thing here. Where in DC or on the East Coast, people feel a certain way about 4th of July. Okay, so should I personally push my political view on you? No. If this is what you would like as a client, we're going to have that set up because it represents the context of our people. So when I'm managing that, or my team is managing that, we're thinking about our cultural context, where they are, how they want to be presented, what type of voice that they want to be presented in, and then we're going about it in that manner. So like, I think National Day of Prayer, which is going to happen here soon. So some churches feel a certain way about National Day of Prayer because they feel like it is super politicized, right? And so some churches are going to post about it and others are not. That is a conversation between your leader and the social media team, in which what we are going to present to the body. My hope, this is only my hope, is that your approach, ma'am or sir, is one that is balanced and represents every person's idea in your church. If it is just yours, then you should take that to your page so you can get whatever criticism you get on your page. This is supposed to represent the body, and we should do that in order and over everything. Representing the body is what's most important, not our political views.
Man, that's so well said. I mean, I think it, the way you worded that, of this represents the whole of our congregation. And I think, and this is where I would probably, when I'll add, when you say nothing, that also says something. And so you're saying something one way or another, with what you post and don't post. And so I think this is an important conversation for every church to have. And I would not put it just on your social media manager to make that decision. I think this is a conversation that, leadership in a church needs to talk about, of what holidays or things like National Day of Prayer are we going to post about or not post about, and why. But we need to be thoughtful about this, because it is communicating how we post about it. If we don't post about it, that communicates.
Can I add to that, brother?
Please.
Also, what's important is how it's designed.
Yeah.
And the colors in which we choose, because that communicates a story to our people. Yeah. So it is, to Neil's point, it is very important that you have these conversations and that you use things that tell the story that represents the whole. I can't stress that enough, because most of the time it doesn't represent the whole. It represents a political view. And people like me can see it on your social media accounts.
Yep.
So, yep.
Yep. I you know, my recommendation here is that our objective should almost solely be to encourage our people to vote. And so that this politics matter. They matter significantly to our church, to our community, to our country. Yep. And our vote is an incredible right that we have, an incredible gift that we get as Americans. And so encouraging your congregants to vote, I think, and pay attention to what's going on societally is meaningful. It doesn't mean you have to share opinions in what you post. So let's talk about a pastor, a lead pastor in particular. Now, this becomes a little more gray because it is a personal platform, but they are the lead representative of your congregation. And so when they say something, people immediately are like, this is the opinion of this church. And so how do you see, DK? How have you seen maybe even pastors approach this well and approach this poorly from your perspective? Because even our sharing these thoughts are opinions. At this point, there's not like, this is the manual and how to do this. These are our opinions on how this can be done from the lessons we've learned through the years.
Yeah, man. Here's what I would say to a pastor. You are still an employee of a church.
Yep.
I'm going to say that again, because some pastors feel like they are not employees. They work for themselves. I need you to not believe that lie.
Yeah.
You are an employee of the church. And since you are the employee, not only are you that, you're also the face of the brand.
Yep.
Okay. They may see a logo, but the next thing they're going to ask you, they're going to see their pastor and what that pastor looks like.
Yep.
So you're the face of the brand. You are the CEO of the church, and you are making statements that doesn't represent the whole.
Yep.
That is dangerous.
Yep.
That is absolutely dangerous. That is, I'm going to use some words, some language here. That is reckless.
Okay.
Right? And you're trying to prove a point under the guise of your religious belief.
Yep.
Did you poll your room? Is everybody in the room saying the same thing? Or is it just you? You got to be careful of that. So if I'm managing a pastor's account, I want to see lifestyle information. I want to see how you living, how you managing, how you living. I want to see you, maybe working out. I think Mike Todd does that. He shows himself working out. I want to see your everyday hustle and bustle, because I want to see the totality of the human being. I don't just want to see your politics, because I'm not really interested in that except one time a year, usually.
Yep.
Unless that's something that you're preaching all day, every day, which is crazy. Yep. So that to me, that should be representing balance. That's the word I want to use for it. If I am a pastor, I'm in the first chair. I want to represent, as you said to A.R. Bernard, I want to present balance to people, that when you see me, that's what you feel. You don't feel me to the left or to the right. I'm right down that middle, and I am balanced. And so that's what I would say or suggest for pastors. And I know there's some pastors, hey, man, you just can't help yourself. You just got to say it. God is telling me to say it. God ain't telling you to say nothing. Get over there and sit down somewhere and trust the professionals to care for you so that you can have longevity. Let me tell you something. Every pastor I've seen who stick their noses and necks out there in one direction, they always pay for it in the other direction. You want to be careful when it comes to that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think careful is the right word here, because it is, it's especially if you're posting a lot, people are paying attention to what you're saying. And so but they are identifying it to a person, not necessarily directly to an organization, but it's going to come back to being directly tied to an organization or your organization that you lead. And so I think it's important that we're really thoughtful in what we're posting, how we're posting it, and what we're just how we message these things. And one of the things I would really encourage you as a leader to do is, and one of the things we did with our pastor was we just encouraged him to basically take away the keys to your social media accounts for 6 months. And because you're going to be tempted sometimes to, like, I just am very passionate about this thing. And what we do is like, hey, can you just run this by a handful of people before this gets posted? And it, and if you're concerned that they might say this is a bad idea, then you know what, it's probably a bad idea. And so just keep yourself out of, you don't want the fallout from that. As passionate as you might feel in a moment, it might hurt you more than it gains the benefit that you perceive that it will in that moment. And at the same time, it might be a good thing to post. I don't know what your situation is in that circumstance, because there are moments in history where, and Martin Luther King was a pastor, and like there are leaders that are pastors that have political opinions that I do think cross over with that are typically policy issues that are important for churches to speak to for different reasons and in different ways. But when you're putting a clear focus towards a candidate or a political party,
you're doing too much.
It does get into it puts you into a sticky situation.
It does.
That I have yet to see the benefits outweigh the fallout from it. So you've got to be just really cautious. So super cautious with your corporate accounts, very cautious with your pastor leader, core leader account or accounts. Now let's talk about volunteers and staff members. Because this is what, you just think about whatever size church you are, your kids pastor has their opinions, your youth pastor has their opinions, your small group volunteer has their leader, their worship leader, so how do you guide, support, direct policy, thoughts, coaching to those leaders, DK, in churches, and what have you seen in that sphere?
Here's what I want to say, because this is a really good conversation. You are entitled to your opinion.
Yes.
Nobody is saying that you have a right to freedom of speech, and you can say whatever you would like, but you're also going to pay for what you say.
Yes.
And it's going to be one way or another, and you have to figure out, is the juice worth the squeeze, as Neil just basically mentioned. When it comes to church volunteers, most of the volunteers you can't police. So you don't know until something goes hella viral. And that's when you'll find out, hey, the church, that person goes to my church. What are they saying? Can you roll up on them at church and say, hey, you need to delete that off your page? The answer is
or
no.
Even should we?
You can't tell people that's not on your payroll what to do. Y'all got to stop trying to be super obedient, controlling driven, because these people are going to do what they want to do when they leave your church. So in my walk, yes, there have been things that come back to us that have been totally off the chain, not even political. Some things are sexual that go online from some of the volunteers that show up. And you can address them as a leader to say and voice concern for them and love for them. Hey, I seen on your social media you did this. Is everything okay? Is there something that we need to worry about or have a conversation about? And to them, they're going to automatically say, no, everything's fine. There's nothing to worry about. And you're going to sit there and watch them spiral. And so you can dismiss them from church, but that's not of God. So that's something that we have to actually drink the fountain on that one, because that person is entitled to have his or her opinion. Now, they're not entitled to lead. Everybody can't lead.
Yep.
If you're a volunteer, if you're paid staff, if you're a pastor, everybody can't lead. And if this does not represent the vision, the mission, the values, the brand of a church, then that person may need to find another place to serve in that is not leadership driven. And so you have to make that decision. Now, what is that rooted in? That's Matthew chapter 18, verses 15 through 20, where it says, if my brother or sister has offended me, I'm supposed to go to them in private, because the focus and the goal is to maintain the relationship. It is not to be a public affair. It is not to be a social media affair. It's me talking to you one-on-one and say, hey, fam, that impacted me. That fell on me the wrong way. Can you help me out with this so that we can move forward together? Now, if I was to push that stage on the other side of that spectrum, the other side of that spectrum says this: if that person, he or she, does not listen to the fact that you're trying to reason with them and make this thing work, the Bible says that you're supposed to treat them like a tax collector and a publican. Now, we don't have to argue what the word says. That's what it is. So if the person doesn't want to listen, they're not entitled to lead.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I think that's straightforward. And that's where I do think, if you don't yet have a social media policy set up for your staff and volunteers, it's an important time to set that up with clear expectations, because I think you're right. If even, I think about pictures that people post that are provocative, or, things like that we should, and that it creates clarity for your staff and volunteers, and what's appropriate and inappropriate for somebody that's leading within your church. And so I think this is just an important day to be really thoughtful about this, but I think we also have to educate them as to the why, as to why this is important, because it also, because they're, to your point of they're like, well, this is my First Amendment right. This is, I should be able to share my opinions. And I think that this is where it does become a gray area, because I do think there's a way that people can share their opinions without being divisive in nature, but they've got to, you got to really be thoughtful about this. And it's not, I think the further down we go in how public these platforms are and how aligned they are in leadership with our church, that it does become grayer and grayer. But I think we really, in a season like this, it's a place for the body to become very divided, and we need to be unified. And it doesn't mean we're unified in who we're voting for. No. But I think we need to be unified in our alignment with each other and as the body of Christ. And so this is a complicated season that I think we've got to navigate carefully. And maybe your church is united in that way, and but man, most churches are not. And I can speak to my church. We definitely, I would say we go to a church where I would guess we're split between half Democrat, half Republican. As a congregation, and I think it just. This is a sticky moment in season, and we see this cyclically, especially around presidential elections in the U.S. And I think we just need to be really careful and thoughtful and intentional with how we approach this. But it's not. I think hopefully you haven't waited until right now, but the heat of this is only going to heat up.
Yes, it is.
And so if you're listening to this right now, begin to really document how we're going to approach things for the next 6 months or so, going into the future, because this is an important time that we can make some big mistakes that are going to haunt us for years to come. And we can approach this and be relieved, come in November, December, January, that, man, we could have stepped on some big landmines, but thank goodness we put some things in place to avoid that. And we can move forward together, whatever the outcome of the election is. And so this is a interesting time, DK, and I think we'll we'll just, I think have to see, what happens. But I think at the end of the day, I hope that your church comes out of this stronger together and unified as a church. And so, we want to help learn from our scars in this experience, in our experiences. And if you have thoughts, we want to continue the dialogue online. And so we're going to post about this on social media. Obviously, we're not talking about who to vote for, anything like that. We're talking about how to navigate this political climate and context that is dominating the social media realm right now, and will continue to. And so, so this is an important time. We appreciate you listening. We appreciate you being a part of the conversation and being a part of this community at Social Media Church. And so, DK, thanks for your insights and thoughts, and thanks to everybody listening. We'll have show notes on the website, socialmedia.church. So make sure you go there and check it out. And we can't wait to continue to talk to you and lean in to social media to further your ministry goals here on the podcast into the future. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you again on the next episode.
Go vote.